The Undocumented Railway Series, Book 5, The Fat Controller's Bizarre Adventure. Dear friends, after the events of Project High Speed, Richard Topham Hatt had a lot of work to do to make up for his blunder. He had fallen out of favour with the Sudgerin people and was now the laughing stock of the whole island. His relationship with his engines and staff wasn't much better, with them losing a lot of respect for him. Despite his flaws, there was still one person who was willing to give him another shot, but is Richard willing to let them in? These stories will tell you what happened, and how Richard was able to take the first steps into becoming a better man. The director. Story 1. Negotiations and a Night Out. The Fat Controller, Richard Hatt, leaned up against the driver's seat of his car. He was parked outside the Soda Island Council offices, a cigarette in hand as usual. He knew he really needed to quit, but he couldn't help himself. His stress levels were on the rise. Where's Josie? She should be here by now, he thought to himself. His assistant was taking her time. Any minute now, their meeting with the minister would begin. What would he say if they were late? At last, a small black car pulled into the car park and stopped a couple of spaces down. Out stepped Josie Adams, his assistant, carrying a big bag of papers, her work laptop, her work tablet, and other bits and bobs. She stepped over to Richard, who hastily dropped his cigarette, stamping it out as she drew alongside. "Ready, sir?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Richard replied with a forced smile. The two headed into the building, where they were greeted by the most unenthusiastic receptionist they had ever seen. "We're here to see the minister," Richard boomed, trying to sound like he had things under control. "Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked drolly. Yes, 2:30, Richard said, a bit thrown off. "And your name?" "Richard Topham Hatt." The receptionist smirked a little and began to slowly type away at her computer keyboard with the longest acrylics known to man, before eventually clicking away at something. And then she said, "You're good to go in." "Thank you," Richard smiled. He was awfully nervous. Thanks," Josie added, quickly following after her boss. Down the hall they went, before eventually reaching the minister's office. They stepped inside to see the minister sat at his desk, elbows placed on the table and hands held together. He made eye contact with the two railwaymen as they walked in. The room was dark and only lit up half his face. Even so, his fierce gaze was still recognisable. It made Richard and Josie feel very on edge. "Hello, Mr. Minister," Richard said with the most forced and most anxious smile. The two sat down on the other side of the desk. There was silence. At last it was broken by the minister. Richard, he began, shaking his head. "You are a strange man. You came to my office almost every week, begging for my permission to build your fancy high-speed rail line. I told you time after time people won't like it, but you carried on and on. Heck, I only said yes at the end so you would stop coming. And now it's all blown up in your face, and you've decided to come crawling back." The man let out a chuckle. "I did try to warn you," he finished with a smirk. Richard gulped and tried to find his words. He stuttered. Josie had never seen Richard so flustered before. He was bombing this meeting hard. She knew she had to jump in and salvage this somehow. Mr. Minister," she put in, "based on the backlash the Northwestern Railway Company has received over Project High Speed, we've come to the conclusion that we were a little bit hasty with our decisions. We have withdrawn our plans and are now trying to make it up to the people of Sodor." The minister listened with an eyebrow raised. "Now, I'm aware we took out a loan from the Sodor Council to help us begin the project at the start of the new year," Josie went on. "Now, I understand it's been most convenient, so as an act of goodwill and to apologise for wasting your time, not only shall we pay all the money back, but we'll also add an additional 10% on top." Richard was horrified, but the minister was intrigued. He pondered. 20%. We'll make it 15. How's that? Final offer." The minister was rather impressed, and so he agreed. Richard, on the other hand, felt like he was going to pass out. The negotiations were soon sorted, and about an hour later, Richard and Josie left the offices and headed back to their cars. You're a pretty good negotiator, you know, Richard said slowly. Oh, well, thanks, Josie replied with an awkward smile. Even so, 15% extra, Richard sighed. It was to smooth things over completely with him. He can't hold a grudge against us now. No, just watch him. Anyways, I need to head back to the office. You're on break now, correct? Yeah. Alright, I'll see you later then, Richard finished, giving his assistant a small and kind of awkward smile, before getting back into his car and driving off back to Tidmouth. Much, much later that night, Josie was sat in her office, typing away at her computer. She sighed. She was tired, bored, and wanted to go home. Staring at the same white walls constantly was beginning to take its toll. The job of being the Fat Controller's assistant did pay well, and heck, having your own private office away from the other employees was one of its many perks. But it was boring. It wasn't how she imagined her 20s at all. I suppose that's just life though, she thought. The wild nights of university were long behind her. She supposed that we all had to grow up at some point. But it was so boring. A knock at the door snapped her out of her trance. She got up and opened it, only to see, to her surprise, Richard. Is something the matter, sir? Asked Josie. A million thoughts ran through her mind. Was there an accident? Another protest, perhaps? Dave said that you were still here, said Richard simply. Yes? You are aware of the time, are you? Asked Richard, raising an eyebrow. It's like 7, I think, answered Josie, not really knowing. It's 9:30, chuckled Richard. I'm going home now, and I suggest you do the same. Oh. She was almost amazed how she didn't even notice. Right then, she smiled. I'll quickly finish my work and head for home. Richard paused. It's your day off tomorrow, isn't it? He asked, already knowing the answer. Yeah it is. Why? Well, I was thinking, why don't we go out for drinks? For what reason? Asked Josie. For managing to sort out the minister, of course. Thought we could go and celebrate, you know. Okay, sure. But aren't you working tomorrow? Now I'll be fine, smiled Richard. I'm a heavyweight. I can handle a couple drinks. Well, if you're sure, smiled Josie. Just let me finish what I'm doing, and I'll meet you in the car park. Great, Richard nodded, walking off down the hall. In truth, he wasn't expecting her to say yes. Josie closed her office door and sat back down. She never actually hung out with Richard outside of work. Tonight would certainly be interesting. She quickly finished writing down what she needed to on her work documents, emailed it to the person she needed to email it to, grabbed her blazer and bag, before heading out of the door. One quick drive later, Richard and Josie were sat in a very fancy bar. Josie had never been to a place like this before. She was more used to quiet, humble pubs, such as the local. Well, before it got closed down after the landlord joined the Anti-Rail League and helped with stealing the bust of Wilbert Audrey from Tidmouth Station. But hey, that's just another Tuesday on Sodor. I used to come here all the time when I was younger, explained Richard. Back before I went to do my apprenticeship on the mainland. Oh wow, said Josie, not really sure what to say. Yep, Richard smiled nostalgically. The days of slap bracelets and grunge. You remember that? Kind of. I was like 7. Oh. And then there was silence. You know, Richard began, I've been working with you for 6 months now, and I barely know anything about you. Huh, yeah, I suppose that's true, Josie agreed. So, you mentioned a partner a couple times, recalled Richard. You guys married? No, Josie answered quickly. We legally can't. Huh, why's that? She's a woman. Oh. Yeah. What about you? Oh, divorced. Oh. Yeah, 5-6 years ago now. Oh, I'm sorry. It's fine. I mean, it's not like you caused it or anything. Yeah. The silence was loud. Josie turned to the bartender, anxiously waiting to get his attention. Richard saw this and decided to just call him over himself. Excuse me? Ah, hello. The bartender walked over. Richard stared at him for a moment. Was this kid even old enough to be serving alcohol? Yeah, Josie began awkwardly. Can I get maybe a glass of woo-woo if you have any? Yes, certainly, said the bartender with that overly polite customer service tone. Richard looked over at Josie, eyebrow raised. Woo what? Oh, it's a cocktail, she explained. You've never had it? I can't say I have, Richard replied thoughtfully. He looked over at the bartender. My good man, make that 2, please. Sure, said the bartender, walking away to make the cocktails. He returned shortly with 2 glasses. He handed them to the 2 businessmen, they both said thank you, and he walked off to take other orders. Richard stared down at this strange drink in front of him. It was a dark shade of red. It looked more like fruit juice than an alcoholic beverage. This was very clearly what his old friends from back in the day would have called a girl's drink. Something wrong? Asked Josie, who was sipping away at hers through a straw. No, smiled Richard, sounding not very sure at all. He picked up the drink, brought it to his lips, and took a sip. His eyes widened, almost popping out of his skull as he swallowed the cocktail for the first time. Oh my god, he said aloud. It was one of the best things he'd ever had in a long time. Josie was surprised and looked over at him, only to see the man practically downing the glass. You like that? She asked. Yeah, cried Richard. He was already half done by now. You know, in some places you can get like a massive jug of this stuff. I wonder if they do that here. My good man, Richard called to the bartender. Can we possibly get more of this stuff in what did you say, a jug? You mean a pitcher? The bartender asked. Ah, yes, whatever, Richard replied, not really knowing what the bartender had even said. It wasn't long before a big pitcher of woo-woo sat before the 2 railway workers. Within 20 minutes, they'd managed to drink their way through the whole thing. The vibe of the evening quickly shifted, and soon they were giggling like school children. Okay, you have to try another one, Josie smiled with an impish grin. Richard's eyes widened. There's more, he cried. Oh yeah, I'm opening up your eyes tonight, Rich, Josie declared, rather uncharacteristically. There's this other one you must have. Oh yeah? What's it called? Josie started to giggle, her grin only growing. It was so funny she could barely spit it out. What? Come on, Richard chuckled. Okay, I'll tell you, Josie smiled. She leaned into his ear and whispered the cocktail's name. What on the beach? Burst out Richard. Shush! Josie protested through fits of laughter. The 2 began to laugh at what really wasn't that funny of a name, but in the 2's tipsy state, it was hilarious. They ordered their next round of cocktails. Then another. And then another. Oh dear.